Hey everybody, this is the Sliders Review, and I'm here today to talk to you about Spider-Noir Season 1. I am so thrilled that this show turned out as good as I hoped, because I was so worried, because never in my wildest dreams did I ever think that Spider-Man would ever come to live action on television, because of the simple fact it's pretty difficult to make Spider-Man look realistic swinging around town and crawling around stuff. They tried back in the old days with like a Japanese series, and I think maybe a live action American series. That was back in like what, the 70s or 80s or 60s or something. And technology was not that advanced back then. And I've never really watched those shows. I've seen clips. And I'll give them credit for trying their best because they knew it was difficult. And this is why Spider-Man has been relegated to animation. But then, of course, the 2000s came, and finally technology advanced to where they can bring that friendly web crawling, swinging neighborhood Spider-Man to life and everything. But only in the movies. And we've gotten some pretty awesome like Spider-Man movies and stuff. And some pretty bad ones and some pretty mediocre ones. But boy, them early 2000s with Sam Raimi, boy, those were some good times back then. And so, like, I've always told myself, like, how come Marvel doesn't take more chances TV-wise with some of their heroes that they can actually do pretty decent with, like, CGI and stuff? Like, I was watching VR Troopers, which is an old 90s show similar to Power Rangers. But it's based off of the, like, Japanese Metal Hero series. And in there, they have people who look like they're wearing metal suits. And I told myself, watching it a few years back, I'm all like, it's not that bad. Like, some of these suits actually look like metal robotic suits and everything. Like, how come they just can't bring Iron Man to life, And so, and then not only them, but the X-Men. Like, there used to be a show called Mutant X that was based off of the X-Men and got in trouble because of it. And I'm just like, they could do this. They really can if they just put the budget where it needs to go, and you can have a streaming Spider-Man series or some other kind of series. Thankfully, because Marvel is now borrowing Spider-Man and Sony owns the rights, and Sony has literally effed up with their Spider-Man-less movies that they created. They finally listened to the fans and gave us like an alternate version, a multiverse Spider-Man in the form of Spider-Noir. They have to call him Spider-Noir because, of course, legal reasons. They can't call him Spider-Man. Same with Peter Parker. Yes, this version of Spider-Noir really is Peter Parker. They're just not allowed to name him that, and they're not allowed to show his original name. But after some events that happened in the war, he changed his name to Ben Reilly of all things. I'm like, that's just so clever. Like, real Spider-Man fans know exactly who Ben Reilly is. And so that was really cool and everything. And Spider, like, or calling him the Spider is not that bad of a nickname, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I would prefer Spider-Man, but hey, I know exactly why they can't. But I was really shocked and amazed. Because, we've all seen that trailer of him swinging around. And, like, I'm just like, good Lord, that's Spider-Man right there. He's swinging like an actual Spider-Man from, like, animation. And, like, from Mark Webb and Sam Raimi Spider-Man. Not this MCU stuff. I don't know what the heck is going on with Tom Holland's Spider-Man, but that man, when he swings around, doesn't really look like he's swinging around like Spider-Man. And what's with all the hopping around that he does? Like, I don't get it. But this dude was moving like Spider-Man. Now, yeah, it did look a little too CGI-ish and everything. And he did look a little bit on the petite, small side. But hey, I'll take that over like the MCU version any day. And the way he was crawling on a wall, both practically and with CGI, was like awesome. Like, I really enjoy it. I hope it comes out on DVD, because I don't want to keep getting Amazon Prime, because I'm getting rid of it again after I'm done watching Citadel Season 2. Which Citadel Season 2 is a heck of a lot better than that of Season 1. And so, yeah. The web slinging, the webs coming out like the wrist, like, the costume and everything. Like, this is something I needed so bad. And I hate that it took me so long to talk about this, but I've been so busy and stuff. And while the show is not like 100% perfect, I would say this is about 90 or 95% awesome perfect. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are some things I wish they kind of would have changed around. I would have went a little bit more like, with Megawatt. I would have just had him be like Shocker or Electro, looking the way he did in the comic, because that's just cool. But no, that dude is literally Megawatt. And can people please stop calling him Electro? He is not Electro. There is an actual Megawatt in the Spider-Man comics. And I get it. He looks like, or you think he's Electro. But, he's not. He's Megawatt. Now, this show, because they couldn't keep specifically to that of the comics and use certain people's names, they really had to like get around all that. They had to use some major wiggle room. Some characters have different names. They have different origins. Like, they really did not want to have to get in trouble. And, thank God for the wiggle room that they used. You know what I'm saying? Because it was good enough, in my opinion. Yeah, some characters don't look the way they do in the comic. Yeah, they got different origins. But what we got on a grounded television type show in a noir type setting, that was just good enough, in my opinion. But I would have loved to see Black Cat, but instead we couldn't get her. But I'm okay with the version we got. I just wanted her to put on a costume. That's all I wanted. You know what I'm saying? Now, it's only 8 episodes, and of course, you could have binged it all at once. The way it came out first on MGM Plus, I guess the cable network first. I didn't even know they had that. I just know they have a streaming site, which that's what I assume. You know what I'm saying? And I'm all like, oh, well, I don't need Amazon Plus then. Not Amazon Plus, but I don't need Amazon in there. Amazon Prime, that's what it's called. I'm all like, yeah, I don't need Amazon Prime. I got MGM Plus. Then I'm over here looking on MGM Plus. I'm like, where the heck is the series at? So I had to literally contact somebody at customer service and everything and be all like, hey, where is this show at? And they're all like, no, it's not on the streaming site. It's on like the TV channels. I'm like, what? No, I just got rid of Amazon Prime. So I literally had to reactivate my Amazon Prime, and I only had like a day and a half of it left. So I binged the crap out of that show. And it was a chore because I watched it first in black and white, and then I wanted to watch it in color, which in my opinion, watching it in black and white is the real true only real way you should watch this show, because it's like a noir setting, you know what I'm saying? Like black and white is how all that old stuff is intended, but they put it in true hue color by the request of that of Nicolas Cage, which real name is not even Cage. His real name is Nicholas Kim Coppola. And so, but of course he changed his last name to Cage because of Luke Cage. Man loves his comic books. I mean, he was supposed to be Superman, kind of was, and he was the Ghost Rider and everything. And so, and now he's Spider-Man. Like, ain't that something? And so, but when you look at a hue, what is it? True hue color. I'm surprised the colors that we got. Like, I'm like, wait, that's what color his suit is? It's not even black. It's like his jacket's kind of like a rusty dark brown and everything. But I will say that gimmick that Amazon Prime had of, switching back and forth, it doesn't work properly. A lot of people have frustrations like myself. I was only able to watch it in black and white at first, and it would not switch over to color. In order for me to switch it over to color, I watched it in black and white on the TV. Then I had to go online on the computer and switch to color, and then it was able to switch it on over to my television. I shouldn't have to do that extra work. It should post the work and everything, but hey, it didn't. And I've always wanted a grounded, more like Batman and animated series live action. That's something they could totally do. And this show proves, hey, they can do it. But of course, Warner Brothers is so weird when it comes to Batman live action. That might never happen. But when it comes to like the black and white and like the color, even though growing up, I had like color TV because I grew up in the 80s and stuff, I would watch those old black and white like shows like I Love Lucy and stuff, and I always preferred color. But my God, there is something you truly get that is splendid when it is in black and white. It's the shadows and the black spaces and everything. They really pop in a way that color just cannot bring out and everything. It's like this, I don't know, it's almost like this majestic, mesmerizing other world when it's in black and white because of like the shading and the shadows and stuff. The way the black of the shadow blends in with the other stuff that's black is just breathtaking. But then my God, when you see it in color, it's really bright, vibrant and everything. And you truly feel like you are in a completely different world when it's in true hue. Now, true hue is just mostly just like very saturated. This is why the colors pop as loud as they do and everything. And it does take away from the black and white, but at the same time, it is kind of cool. You know what I'm saying? And so I do like this switching back and forth of like, the options that they give you. But they really need to make a Batman show, man. You know what I'm saying? They really need to make a Batman show. Now, with only 8 episodes, I was actually surprised they was able to tell so much and so much detail and stuff. I was a little worried because most shows are like 8 to 10, 13. You always need those additional episodes, but somehow they pulled it off. And not only did they pull it off, but the ending of season 1, you can go either way. If it gets renewed, then you will get more character development, different villains in the second season. The story will continue. If it does not and get canceled, it ends in a way that is satisfying and everything. They were smart about that. But I'm an American. I'm not from the UK. I want my full 20 to 30 something episodes a season. But if they were to have extra episodes, they might have ruined it because they told a very linear story. Now, out of these 8 episodes, 4 are my absolute favorite. The first 2 and the last 2. Somewhere in the middle, it does tend to slow down a little bit. And then there's like an origin episode that takes up the entirety of the episode and it really slows it down. But not so bad in a way that you're so bored, you're so tired and everything. Yeah, it is dialogue heavy, but the dialogue is pretty edgy. The acting is great. The casting is great. I do have a little bit of problem with Nicolas Cage's voice because of the simple fact he has gotten older and his voice, kind of sounds like gritty and muffly a little bit, and it's kind of hard to understand what he's saying. It's kind of muffled a little bit like how mine is at times, but with a deeper, gravelly, more voice, And of course, when he has the mask on, you really can't understand what he's saying. They should have enhanced it with ADR or some type of whatever Hollywood technology they do to improve people's voices and stuff. I think sometimes they'll use AI or something like that to enhance somebody's voice, or just something they use. I forget what it is, but yeah. Now when he's in the mask, I'm almost certain Nicolas Cage is actually wearing a mask over his face when he's doing the dialogue, because his voice sounds more muffled and everything. And I would suggest if they get a season 2, do not do that. Also, they need to get a different stunt actor. Nothing against the stunt actor they had in this one, because he was great. But his body design does not look nothing like Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cage is near 60? He's tall, he's thick, and you'll see him wearing the actual Spider-Man clothes and stuff, and then you'll see his stunt double, and his stunt double is shorter and skinnier. And you can always tell that is not him. And it's jarring, and it's distracting and everything. Now, Oren Uzil, I think that's how you say his name. He's the one who developed this, but he was showrunner along with Steve Lightfoot. And it's a collaboration of Sony, MGM, and that of Amazon. And I just think they just really truly knocked this out the park. And I hope they get a second season. This, I'm still just shocked and amazed. This should not have been this good, and it was. Now, yes, Spider-Man Noir the comic is very dark, very gritty. This show is more like a PG hard 13. Yeah, they throw out some cuss words in here and there, and it is dark and a bit gritty, but it's also humorous and a little bit lighthearted, especially because Nick Cage, the legend, the myth, he's in this and stuff, and he's bringing that Nick Cage energy, and you can tell the dude was just having fun. And so, but Spider-Man Noir does not act the way Spider Noir does, But you can tell this dude has some quirks in him and everything. And that humor really did help bring out, like, you know, more appeal to this series. I do wonder what would it look like if it was very dark, very gritty. It would probably look like, the Dark Knight trilogy or something like that. Which not bad, but when you think of Spider-Man, you do think of lightheartedness, but of course this is a very different Spider-Man. This is an older Spider-Man, he's moody and everything. Now, technically, Spider-Man Noir carries around a gun. Spider Noir does not, but Ben Reilly does. So they did have that. They also gave him organic webbing. And it's black, the way it's supposed to be in the comics. But he gets his powers completely different. Think of something like Smallville or the very first Deadpool movie on how he gets his powers, kind of. They changed it in a way that they had to so they wouldn't get sued, but they changed it in a way that is, yes, believable and everything. Now images in the trailer make a heck of a lot more sense. Because I'm all like, that man spider in the trailer, that didn't look like Nicolas Cage. And it was not. And so that was interesting and stuff, I think. Because I've been wanting to see Man Spider for the longest time. Now, when this series came out on May 27th, man, it took me a long time to talk about this. When I was watching it on day one, it wasn't number one on Amazon. It was like number 3 or 2 at that point. I'm all like, are people sleeping on this? Like, why isn't it number one? Normally, when their new stuff comes out, it's number one. Then at some point, it did reach that number one status. Trying to think. Citadel right now is at number 3. And Spider Noir. That don't make no sense. How are they both at number 3? That don't make no sense. You can't even trust their own site. Anyway, at one point it did reach like number 1, but it's been bopping around since. And the sad truth about this, it just came and gone. Like, that's it. Like, nobody talks about it no more. But that's the price that people have to pay when you binge it all at once and everything. It could have been weekly. I think it would have done like well, but I would not have been able to watch it if it was like weekly because I was running out of Amazon Prime. So I'm gonna start off with that of Peter Parker, aka Ben Reilly, the Spider. So this version is technically Peter Parker. He was part of World War II. And no, there's no nods to that of Captain America, nothing like that. But like, he was a soldier and he helped a bunch of POWs escape. But when he helped them escape, he ended up getting bit, but not by a radioactive spider. See, in this version, Germany was experimenting on US soldiers that were captured and infusing them with some type of weird experimentation, mutation type stuff like that. And they was experimenting with this one soldier who was Man Spider. And they had this giant tarantula in a jar infusing him with this DNA. When he turned this man around, the man bit the crap out of him. And this is how he got his spider powers. As opposed to the comics where I think he opened up like a totem or something like that and tons of spiders came out and just bit him. And what's interesting is that he has the powers of a spider, but he technically has the powers of a tarantula. And I don't think tarantulas make webbing. At least I don't think they do. So after this, he had to go to like a medical facility in like America where he started just to freak out, having all these weird quirks and this and that and like hallucinating and passing out and this and that, right? And so he is the only one when the German people were I can't talk. When the German people were experimenting on US soldiers and stuff, their DNA didn't take on the mutation the way Ben did, or Peter, I should say. And so after this, Peter just decided, you know what? I'm gonna change my name to Ben Raleigh and like become a PI and everything. But of course, he gained the powers of Spider. So he became the Spider. And he was just web slinging ever since, stopping crime and stuff. But then tragically, the love of his life ended up drowning. And I think it was part of his mistake that he made. Something that happened where he was unable to stop somebody or something like that. And her car just like went into the ocean and she drowned. Or it was something like that. Either that or he was drunk. Something. I don't know what the heck happened. But like, anyway, the love of his life drowned. Now, the love of his life in this series was never Mary Jane Parker or Gwen Stacy. I'm assuming they couldn't use those people because technically MJ is in the MCU. It's just that she's just called MJ instead of Mary Jane. As for why Gwen is not the love interest, I don't know. Maybe the MCU plans on bringing her in at some point. I don't know. But because of that, he was so devastated that he just gave up the whole superhero business. He put a hole in the wall, put his suit in there, filled it up, and just stopped. And for 5 years, he hasn't been the Spider. As a result, he just became moody, grumpy, very blunt towards people, and has a drinking problem. And so his business, his PI business, just isn't doing as well as it used to. Nobody's really going, and they don't really have the money to keep things afloat. At some point in time, when he's just out and about, he noticed something very strange. There was a man with fire powers. So, being him, he decides, he doesn't want to do this no more, but he has no choice. So he tries to stop that man and everything. The man ended up dying and everything. And so at some point, Kat Hardy, who is technically this version of Felicia Hardy, she propositions him with the offer he really can't refuse because he needs the money and stuff. She wants him to investigate what happened to Flint Marko and everything. So he starts doing his PI thing. Now he has quirks to him, like when he's in this one building, he sees a guy doing something and he takes a picture of that guy. Nicolas Cage said, it's about 30% Bugs Bunny that he portrayed this on. And the other percent, I think it's Humphrey Bogart, I think. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, it is. And 70% Humphrey, and then 30 is Bugs. And so because of this, and him now looking into what happened to Flint Marko with this whole Silvermane thing and donning his costume again, this has caused a bit of a mess in the city. And when he goes to retrieve like his costume, it's interesting because like, he does kind of like the whole disguise thing where he's pretending to be like, I think like a plumber. He has to go back to his old apartment, make a bunch of noise to get his suit and this and that. He does a lot of like undercover investigation type stuff. And it's cool seeing Nicolas Cage do that, even though that doesn't really happen in like the comics. It's completely different. But they do have to minimize how much that, he's in the suit and how he's out of the suit because of course the actor wants to show his face. So this was a cool way. And his disguised name was Peter or something. So that was a nice little nod as well. He does eventually start to form like feelings for Cat Hardy, which she does have feelings for him too, but she's also using him. And when he's investigating this whole Flint Marco thing, a bigger conspiracy has like unfolded. One in which, the crime boss Silvermane, and two, all those POWs that were like in World War II that were experimented on, who are now his supervillains and stuff. One thing about this Spider-Man I really like is how cunning and smart he is. Not just with the like disguises, but with the whole PI thing. Because normally a Spider-Man is very highly intelligent in a scientific kind of way. This one is not. So he has to be street smart. And the thing is, when he started being the spider again, it attracted attention. The mayor wanted a piece of him, and so did Silvermane and everything. Silvermane, I forget why, because it's been a couple of weeks since this came out. Like, he sent some of his thugs over to Ben Riley's place, the PI place, and he roughed the place up and scared, Ben's assistant. So Ben decided, I ain't having this crap, and chased down like Silvermane vehicle and his bodyguard vehicles, took them out and threatened the crap out of Silvermane, talking about if you mess with Riley again, I'll kill you and everything. I'm like, did he just say what I think he just said? And so I do like how they kept some of that grittiness and stuff. And that's how I like how he uses like, his brain. Like he knows he has this secret identity. He knows that Ben Riley just can't go there and beat them up. So he has to find a way to get around that. And that's to say like, oh, Ben Riley, he's my friend and everything. And he used to take good pictures of me and blah, 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 blah. And we have a mutual understanding. He's a PI. He finds stuff out. And I go and I beat the guys up, stuff like that. But not only does he use his brain like that, but like when Silvermane eventually hires that Ben Riley and gives him money, Ben determines that all of these bills are marked. And that's how Silvermane keeps track of it. So he uses that to his advantage when one of Silvermane's right-hand guys wants Ben to report to him directly. He has to get rid of this dude, but not make it look suspicious and everything. So he sneaks in, with his Spider-Man costume. And I love the goggles, how they light up at night and everything. And he steals some of like Silvermane's regular money. Then he put the marks on like the regular money to make it look like the mark money, making it think that Silvermane's right-hand guy is stealing his money and everything. That gets him off his back and off of like, Cat and everything. And it's kind of like, he can be smart, but he don't got to be like book smart. He can be street smart. And since this is a grounded noir crime drama, it's best to be street smart. And I love that and everything. And one other interesting thing about this is when we find out his origin story. Now, that's basically a huge flashback episode, but that doctor lady, because he does his PI thing and figures out that this doctor lady who helped try to treat him and everything has also been experimenting this and that, and she's trying to find a cure for her son because he aged like crazy, and she's trying to like reverse that. And this is kind of why she started experimenting also on those POWs and stuff. And those POWs, their life is like burning out, but for whatever reason, the spider, he bonded somehow to this new mutation. And yeah, they use the word mutant in everything, or mutation, I can't remember which one. And of course, that's a whole X-Men reference type thing, which I'm surprised they was able to use since, the MCU now owns that because Fox used to own it. But it turns out that I think, what was it? It's not bone marrow she took from my thing. At first she used blood. That didn't work. Was it bone marrow or was it something else? It was something, or his liver or something like that. So she started getting some of his organs and testing it, and turned out that she can whip up a cure, and she saves her son. And he has vials now of the cure, and he's contemplating taking it because he doesn't want these powers no more. He is still grieving over the loss of his loved one. Not to mention, he just wants to be normal and everything. And he uses the cure to stop a lot of those supervillains and stuff. But things don't always go the way he wants to, because a lot of the vials get busted in a fight. And I also like how he doesn't do this kind of alone. Now, of course, everybody loves him when Spider-Man does the whole solo thing. But he has allies. This makes sense in a live action setting because, it gives the other characters something to do. Robbie Robertson and his assistant, even that little boy, they all help out. And Robbie knows his true identity. The assistant knows, but he doesn't know she knows. And the little smart mouth boy is just there to help out, to dodge the villains and everything. So he can go, because they're supposed to keep an eye on Ben, but Ben has to go swinging around town looking for stuff, And there was a case where they kind of pull a Superman Lois Lane thing, where it's kind of hey, something? Superman's always saving Lois Lane. And, but if Clark Kent is Superman, then he should stop this bullet from piercing Lois' skin. If not, Lois is going to die. So they basically do that with Cat, because they start to suspect that, because Megawatts all wait a minute, that guy was in who rescued us back in the war and everything. And so they determined he might be the Spider. So Silvermane, is gonna shoot Cat. And he's all look, if you're really Spider, then you will be able to stop this and everything. And so the greatest thing happened when Robbie shows up dressed like the Spider. Another reference they did in this is the whole Peter losing his powers, which is something we've seen in animation, comics, live action before. And I'm not quite sure why he loses his powers every once in a while. I guess he overexerts himself because he's older now or something. Because he has organic webbing and that doesn't work. It's a little bit of a nod to the second Spider-Man movie, but it's also an even huger nod to that of the animated series from the 90s. Because when Spider-Man was going up against the Insidious Six, Silvermane was pretending to be a good guy, and his powers kept going out because he was turning into Man Spider. Also, this Spider-Man is not afraid to kill. He was straight up murder your behind and everything. And after the bad guys are like defeated and everything and whatnot, he realized that there's nothing gonna be between him and Kat, especially how she betrayed him and everything. And she gives the whole line, in another lifetime, we could have been together. And what he tells her at the end, ooh, that pissed her off. Because he simply just doesn't care. He is blunt. He, has given up on people and stuff like that. He's very vulgar to people. This is not your traditional Peter Parker Spider-Man. But at the end, he decides to keep his powers. He keeps his job as a PI. Now him and his assistant, he named the business after both of them instead of just after himself. This is kind of a nod to the live-action Netflix Daredevil series. All right, so let's see what other character we're gonna get into. Oh, before I get into another character, I love that they gave him a spider sense and it has a slight visual to it because, like, Tom Holland Spider Man, he's our current Spider Man. And this dude he's been in about 6 MCU movies, 3 where he's like the complete lead, and like others where he just like, appeared in. 6 movies and only showed his spider sense once. And the dude went like multiple movies, and people just kept asking, does he not have a spider sense? Because things seem to like, he seems to not be able to like figure out something's coming towards him. But then he showed it in Infinity War, and it was the weirdest way. The hair on his arms just stick up. So he would literally have to be looking at his arm in order for that to happen. I still can't believe that's how they did that. But I like how they did it here. Basically, he has pain in the back of his neck, and there's like a trembling and like a vibration with the camera work and everything. I would have preferred something from like, the 90s animated series, because that was awesome. But whatever, at least he has it. You know what I'm saying? Like, this dude acts like when he's doing the Spider-Man power thing, he acts more like Spider-Man than the MCU one, and that's a shame. Joe Robbie Robertson. Now, when it comes to Robbie Robertson, I always assumed his name was Robert. They might have to change it for this show. He is played by, and I'm not sure how to say his name, La Morin Morris. I have no idea who that actor is. Now, it made sense that they will be able to use him because of the simple fact Robbie technically does not exist in the MCU. And this Robbie is a former employee of the Daily Bugle. I'm surprised they were able to use that. But I guess since they never use a traditional daily, not I want to say Daily Bugle, because in the MCU it's more like a podcast type thing instead of a news journal building. But they did show JJ in the MCU, so they couldn't use him here. They had to use somebody completely different. But it would have been cool if J.K. Simmons would have showed up as JJ, but they couldn't do that. But he basically has he works, I think, freelance and everything. And because he's working freelance, he is struggling bad. Like, the dude literally has to eat like bread with like ketchup on it and just make it a meal. And this is technically how Peter is supposed to be like in the comics. He's poor. So they kind of took that and put it into Robbie. And so, like, he knows about, like, Ben's secret. Not sure how he knows exactly, but he does. And he's his greatest confidant, his best friend, and everything. And they solve cases together in this show, which I really like. Now, he has his own side story where he's also trying to figure out this whole Silvermane thing and, like, the POW thing and mostly the Silvermane thing. And so, it leads him to this woman who was married to one of Silvermane's goons and everything, the dude who had fire powers. And so, like, excuse me. So, like, at the end, he has to help Ben out by dressing up as like the spider. And so they jab him with the cure. And, he has to pretend like, oh, I have no more power, but he never had them anyway. And so, like, he was a great addition to, like, the show. Sadly, however, he is the black best friend, which I do not like. Now, one great thing about him is his whole relationship with Tombstone. Now, I'm not sure how in the comic what their relationship is, but in the animated series, they were former best friends. And they got in trouble with the law, but Robbie was able to, just do, like, I think, like, community service or whatever. But Lonnie got completely locked up and became a hardened criminal after that, and was experimented on, and became like Tombstone. And so Robbie turned his life around because he ran and everything and was able to get away from it, but his best friend wasn't. His best friend blamed him for it. And so, here's a little bit differently. Here they don't know each other, but as he's investigating that POW, he comes into contact with Lonnie. And, they talk and they bond here and there, but then Lonnie turns into a criminal in this show, which he tries to talk him out of it, but he doesn't want to listen. And then he jabs the cure in Lonnie's eye because his skin is like, brick and everything. After that, they like bond some more, and it's more like not a brotherly love type thing, but just like, a understanding of what they're both going to, because they're both black men living in this like 1930s setting, which I have a problem with. It is the same exact problem that I had in Haley Steinfeld's Dickinson's show, where it's an old-timey setting and they change it. Well, in Dickinson, they change it to where even though it's old-timey, they use modern slang. And not only that, but if you see somebody of color, like say an Asian person, they are accepted and aren't treated badly whatsoever. Same with the LGBT. But in Dickinson, they still treat the black people the way they would have been treated back in them old days. Looking down on them, not wanting to be around them, treating them like crap because of the simple fact they're black. Here, they do that same crap, and it pisses me off because Kat Hardy is Asian, and they treat her just like they'll treat a white person. But they treat the black people the way they treated them back in the 1930s, looking down on them, treating them like crap, and he has to take the blunt of it. I don't know why they do this crap. They did that also in Agent Carter. It makes no sense. If you're trying to show that your MCU or Marvel project or whatever has diversity in it in this old-timey setting and that people are accepted, then why in the world do you still treat the black folks like they're back in the old days? And that drives me nuts. So Janet is Ben's like secretary, and she's played by Karen Rodriguez. And Janet is a completely made up character. I mean, maybe she's like Gloria Grant, but so far she's the made up character. And so, and like I said before, she's like, she's Latino and she's accepted, but Robbie is not. Like, that makes no sense in this show. But, like, she is a little bit like Etta Candy, a little bit like from the comics. She's like sarcastic, she's like, a nice person, she's caring. All the guys love her at the police station and everything, but she's married, but we never get to see her husband. And so she really gives it the bin about, like, how we gonna pay the bills in this building, and like, you're taking cases and aren't really charging people, or you don't really have that many cases and this and that. And she does not like Cat Hardy at all. But she's very sympathetic and cares about Ben, but not in a romantic kind of sense. She also secretly knows that he is the spider because he's always getting drunk, and either he's changing in his room and she walks in, but he's so drunk that he doesn't remember, or he'll just straight up tell her, but then so drunk he doesn't remember. And so, but when you watch the show, it's kind of like you assume she knows and that he knows she knows, but apparently, like I said before, he's always getting drunk and just doesn't remember. She slightly helps out with cases, but not in a major kind of way. She mostly just does secretary stuff, and she also looks after that little boy who tends to hang around him, teaching him like his lessons in school, kind of like a tutor. I'm not sure why he's not learning in school. Maybe because he's always on the street selling stuff. Cat Hardy. So this is technically Felicia Hardy from the comics, aka the Black Cat. But here, this version is just called Cat Hardy because, they're not allowed to use her name for whatever reason, and she never becomes the Black Cat, which sucks because I would have loved to see her wear a costume. She is played by Lee John Lee, and I remember her from Wu Assassin. But I don't remember her from Wu Assassin. I remember Wu Assassin, and I know there are two Asian women in it, but I don't remember her. But anyways, she does a phenomenal job here. Like, they tweaked her story a bit. In the comics, she owns her own nightclub, and she's a singer. Here, she does not own nothing, but she's a singer and she's one of Silvermane's girls. And she's dating Flint Marco, aka the Sandman. And she is the one who recruits Ben to figure out what happened to that of Flint. But she doesn't tell him the complete truth. She manipulates, Ben into taking this case and everything because she wants to know what happened to Flint. But she knows what happened to Flint and she knows where he is and stuff. But she has a hidden agenda. She wants to kill Silvermane. They kind of based her off of Matt Reeves' Selena Kyle a little bit, where she has a huge grudge against, like, this huge mobster. Instead of being related like in the Batman, instead she wants revenge because she used to see, she works for him and she sings. Now her singing voice is sung by somebody else. Here she was dating a guy, a goon of Silvermane, and he has a rule: no dating and everything. So he killed that dude because he got close to that of Cat. And she doesn't like that. That's why she kept her relationship with Flint completely secret. And so she's been wanting to kill that dude ever since, but been waiting for the right moment. When things are going bad for Flint and to the point where she really doesn't know where he's at, she does start to fall for that of Ben. Now, the whole her falling for Ben happened a little too quickly, in my opinion. Very rushed. I can understand why Ben has moved on from his dead girlfriend and everything, so that makes sense. But they kind of have her as a woman who's dependent on just dating a man. And so she does plan on just running off with Ben and everything until she starts to find out about like Flint, the POWs, and the cure. So then she rats out that of Ben. She tells that scientist lady or whatever I think it was who Ben really is, the spider, because she determines that he is. And so, like, she completely just betrays him and everything. And I was just like, nah, man. But you gotta remember, Felicia Hardy is like kind of like an anti-hero, a little bit gray, a little bad and a little good, you know what I'm saying? And so at the end, she does get her revenge on Silvermane in a very, very cool kind of way, where they're kind of like in this funhouse type thing, and the glass is shattered, and she's shooting and everything. And so at the end, her and Flint they like leave together. And so most likely, if there is a second season, she won't reappear. It just sucks we never got to see her in costume. I forget what this dude's name is, and I don't know who he's based off of in like Marvel comics and stuff, but he was sent by Cat to burn down that Silvermane's place. And this, of course, caught the attention of Ben, which later brought him into contact with Flint and that of Cat Hardy. Flint Marco, man, I was very shocked that they put the Sandman in here. I'm all like, how are they gonna do that? Well, about as budgetary as they could. Very grounded, where little flakes of sand kind of flake off his face. Maybe he'll like ball up his fist and do like a sand fist, but that's really about it. And then his skin completely busting into like sand and stuff like that. So when Ben was investigating, I think the fire dude, he came in the crosshairs of that of Flint. Every time Flint turns into like sand or whatever and uses his powers, he doesn't remember what happens and kind of blacks out. It's the side effect of that mutation because their life force is like burning out. And so he's very protective of Cat. And once he starts to see that Ben might be interested, he doesn't like that. But he ends up working for that of Silvermane, along with a couple of other goons and everything that were former POWs. He's just had it. And he's all like, I'll be my own man and make my own money. And Silvermane got my back and blah, 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 blah. Now he knows about the whole Cat and Silvermane thing. And he doesn't like him either. And so towards the end, when he's like fighting Spider-Man, he eventually turns sides and like helps Spider by trying to fight Megawatt. But his like Megawatt is just too strong. And of course, when like something sand is like heated, it turns to glass. And so his hand turns to glass and Megawatt like shatters it and everything. But like eventually, I forget who gives him the cure. And when they give him the cure, like he has his hand in his pocket. I guess because they couldn't put like CGI it out or whatever. But for the most part, he is a very complicated villain, moral and everything, but is corrupted. But the whole him loving Cat thing, that really, it just brings out a different side of him. Lonnie Lincoln, Tombstone. Now, this version is very different. Once again, a POW who's been experimented on, but it's his skin that's different. See, in the comics, Tombstone skin is literally like that of brick, and it's like the color of a tombstone brick. kind of like this grayish blue light color, and like bleach, almost blonde type hair. And so in the animated series in the 90s, he was just a goon and was like a thug and everything, working for the mob. And then in Spectacular Spider-Man, he's his own mob boss. Now, here, like I said before, he's a POW and he has a kinship to that of his other POWs who've been experimented on, looking at them like brothers and stuff. And so when Flint starts to, get in his head, you're like, yo, man, we got the power, like we should work for Silverman, get some money, instead of being poor and this and that. So they look after each other, but he does get corrupted by that. Now his skin is completely different. Lonnie has always been black in every continuity, but here they kept his regular skin tone color. But they gave him these little bumps, kind of like on his face a little bit, that look more crocodilian than it does that of like stone. And, he's not that albinish, like, bluish gray type color. Now, like I said before, it's Robbie that kind of helps turns him around and injects him with the cure in his eyeball. And you see the needle and syringe just flopping out his eye. Dirk Layden, Megawatt. He's Megawatt, not Shocker, not Electro, Megawatt. And I never even heard of Megawatt before, but yes, he is from Spider-Man comics. Now this dude, once again, is a POW, but this one's just a piece of crap. He's perverted, he's just straight up evil, and you can tell this dude is just chewing up the scenery with this scene. He is all about just being bad and using his powers. So he loves working for Superman and killing as many people as possible. And he's the only one who doesn't turn like over a new leaf. This dude is just straight up bad. It has like a very, very out there personality. And so he just electrocutes the heck out of the spider and stuff. And he's just going toe to toe with that of like Sandman, to the point where like I said before, he turns Sandman hand to ice and just shatters it in everything. But he never gets the cure because he doesn't have to. The spider literally webbed him and flung him as far as possible to where he got hit by like not a train, but one of those things kind of like a train that's kind of like up in the air on those bridges type thing. I can't think of the name of them, but the dude gets like completely splattered and everything. Now, Dr. Faber and her son. The older version is played by that one dude who was in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Played Garrett and everything. And so she is a person who's been trying to find a cure for her son. And she's been experimenting on those former POWs and stuff. Trying to find a cure by any means possible. So she has found multiple POWs and has experimented on them and has their body in jars. They're like her little guinea pigs and everything. Once, she gets a hold of Ben and she finds the cure, her son is now transformed back into a youthful man. Only for them to meet their demise by Silvermane and his goons and everything. He doesn't like the idea of her experimenting on them and like keeping them in jars and this and that. So he just straight up murders them and burns the entire building down. And at first, you kind of feel sad for them, but then you have to stop and remember she was going to kill Ben because she wanted no loose ends. Her son didn't want that to happen and helped them, tried to help them escape or something like that, but then the bad guys started showing up. So she's just as evil as the other goons in this, like, series. Silvermane. Now, Silvermane, I remember from Spider Man the animated series. He was this really old man who was trying to find the fountain of youth, but then started de aging even to the point of like a baby and stuff. He's supposed to be an Italian mobster, but this version is an Irish mobster. Now, at first, the actor who's playing him is trying his best to cover up his Irish accent, but then you start to hear it come out. So, I guess they said, screw it, just make him an Irish mobster and everything. He's basically one dimensional, like he's just like a thug, he's a mob boss and everything. He's all about that money, he's all about that corruption, and he's all about like, hiring people to work for him. And, he's rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Robbie, Ben, and of course Felicia and everything. And so like he wants to rig, I think, like the election or something like that because he really doesn't like the mayor. But of course, he meets his demise by the hands of that of Felicia. All in all, I enjoyed this series. And, I really hope they get that second season. But if they don't, I'm satisfied with what this is. I hope it comes out on DVD. And if it comes out on DVD, I'm hoping there's two different versions. Of course, the color and the black and white. I still, to this day, can't believe we got a live action Spider Man series. Like, come on, that's awesome. And it was so crazy that, Nicolas Cage played him after voicing him in Into the Spider-Verse and stuff. Now, Into the Spider-Verse, Spider-Man Noir was a bit different. He was way more comedic and kind of goofy, stupid in a way. And so I was really scared when I heard that Nicholas was going to play him 30% of Bugs Bunny. And especially after how he voiced him in like Into the Spider-Verse. But I'm completely shocked and amazed by what I saw. It was a heck of a lot more serious and stuff. Alrighty, well, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.